So let me start the session. Is that okay?
Sure.
Even with all this technical difficulties, I'll just start the session. Um, okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this great session on adaptive paradigms, blending multiple career theories for culturally informed practices. My name is Ann Chan, and I'll be assisting with the Zoom session today. I will monitor the chat, the waiting room, and assist with any technical difficulties if I can. Please ensure that your microphones stay on mute, and if you're able to, please turn on your cameras. If you do not want your video or name to appear in the video recording, please turn off your camera and feel free to rename yourself as participant. We are recording this session, so please be aware of that. I will go ahead and turn it over to our wonderful presenters today, Yas and James, to get us started, and they said they'll introduce themselves. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Anne, Sherilyn, Alexandra. It's so nice to see you both. So I'm Yas Hardaway. I'm the Executive Director of Career Services at Pepperdine's Graduate School of Education and Psychology, where I am the course lead and adjunct faculty for our Career Development Theories and Techniques course. So really enjoy the discussion on how theory can be translated to practice. And I'll turn it over to one of my favorite people to work with, James, to introduce himself.
Thanks, Yas. So I'm James Sillcox. I also teach at Pepperdine, the vocational development class for our graduate students. I also teach a similar class at NYU, where I did my own counseling degree years ago. I'm a private career coach, and my background's in higher ed career services. So I worked at the University of San Diego as the director of the School of Business Career Services Office for about 10 years, and at NYU as a director there for a while before. So very excited to be here today. We'll go through our agenda here quickly, which maybe very, very quickly, you can read it for yourselves, but we're going to introduce kind of a broader learning or a broader definition of work, go over some theoretical frameworks quickly, and then apply them to a case study. So broadly, our learning objectives, our hope here is that we can apply some theoretical stuff that maybe we'll ask here in a second. Maybe Yas has already, yes, I see, put this in the chat. So get a sense of how familiar some of these things are or not. But we're going to revisit some theories that maybe came up in graduate school or sometime since then, and hopefully try to make them a little bit more practical and applicable through this case study. So deepen our understanding of those frameworks through those through the application with the case study. Maybe refamiliarize ourselves with some of the key concepts that we learned a while back, and then personalize some of those through this PROP model, the personal relevance framework that Yas will talk about, and hopefully make them a little bit more real, and do all of this hopefully collaboratively, so in conversation with all of you. This broader definition of work that I mentioned is influenced by David Bluestein's work. So Bluestein uses this term work instead of career very intentionally to include all forms of labor, not just what we think of as sort of a privileged career. And the idea in psychology of working theory, Bluestein's theory, is that work can contribute to people's sense of well-being. So this happens through the fulfillment of these three fundamental needs: basic survival or power and survival. So things like financial stability, being able to have a roof over your head, that obviously this is a basic need. Kind of think of Maslow's hierarchy as you go through these, sort of a basic fundamental need that can be fulfilled through work. Also social connection and contribution. So work creates opportunities for relationships, for impacting society. And then self-determination, our ability to take ownership of our lives, to have decisions, to have control over the things that we do, to implement our own desires and values. And this leads to a sense of purpose, to a sense of increased motivation through creating a space for autonomy, competence, and relatedness, additional sets of needs in self-determination theory. But not all work automatically just does this. So Bluestein emphasizes this concept of decent work. And this is seen as like a fundamental human right. So the idea of decent work is adapted from the work of the International Labor Organization. And this is like it's aspirational, but this is like a baseline to create more equitable equitable and fulfilling work opportunities for everybody globally. So these are things like safe working conditions, fair income, job security to some extent, and the freedom for an employee to express concerns. And so a lack of decent work does not fulfill those three basic needs of power and survival, self-determination, and social connection, and so does not contribute to increased well-being, whereas access to decent work fulfills those three basic needs and increases people's well-being. So the work of a counselor has to focus not just on the person, but also on the systemic factors that facilitate people's access to or limited access to decent work.
Great. Thank you, James. So now that we have a common definition of work, we want to transition to the theoretical portion of the presentation. And while there are a number of different career development theories, we've just selected 3 that we'll highlight. And so we won't be able to do a deep dive, but we'll provide some key constructs for each of these theories. So lifespan, career construction theory, and happenstance learning theory. After we provide a brief overview and review specifically some of the relevant constructs, then we'll introduce a case study and give everyone an opportunity to play with the application a bit. So I will kick us off with lifespan. So for those of you who are familiar with lifespan theory, this theory was developed by Donald Super in the 80s, and it looks at career development as a lifelong process. And specifically, one's career development is an expression of their self-concept, so how they view themselves. And the self-concept in particular is that in which all individuals, irrespective of their background or resources, seek work that aligns with their identity and values. So according to this theory, this is a fundamental part of career development. So as one is developing their self-concept, they're doing this across life stages, and each life stages that an individual go through has unique vocational tasks that one is navigating. So according to Super, one's career development unfolds through these distinct stages. So beginning with growth when we are younger and are curious, moving into exploration, establishment, maintenance, and decline is what is listed on the rainbow, but many don't like that word. So disengagement is another way of looking at the later years of our career development. And again, each of these stages have their own unique vocational challenges. Just like if you look at life from a human development perspective, each of our life stages has unique developmental tasks. So as we move through different life stages, we occupy different life roles. So Super has listed a number of life roles, and there's variations in what they may be called, and people have chosen to add or edit some of these roles. But we have homemaker, parent, caregiver, worker, citizen, leisureite. So those are some of the life roles. And our participation in or our salience, the salience of these roles shift throughout our life. Okay, so that creates a very dynamic life space, is that as we move through different stages, different roles become more salient, and or we're able to put in more time and energy to some roles than others, either by choice or what's required. So as we move through these life stages and engage in these multiple life roles, we are also impacted by other factors. So environmental factors, so these are external influences like culture, family, the job market, situational factors or determinants, and these might be unexpected life events or circumstances that occur. And then, of course, personal factors or personal determinants. So these are individual traits and might include our interests, our values, abilities, strengths. And then the final construct I have listed here is that of career maturity. And so this is really the readiness to make appropriate career decisions at various stages of our life. And this is a result of really being able to have an accurate self-assessment or that knowledge of self in conjunction with occupational knowledge. So knowledge of who we are and knowledge of the world of work those two together can help create a situation where we become more ready or more mature to make that next decision. All right, now I'll pass it over to James to talk about career construction theory.
Thanks. So lots to say about career construction theory, and I will do my best to be brief. But Mark Sillcox, who developed this theory, is a student of Donald Super's, and so you see some of that developmental stage theory still show up in Super. You also see building on the ideas of another traditional theory from John Holland, the hexagon that you might remember. But the idea with career construction theory, this is a narrative-based career counseling approach. So emphasizing the uniqueness of every individual's story. And so career development is seen as like creating a career story, one that grows and evolves over time. This isn't just about making a single career decision or about navigating transitions between, say, different stages throughout life. There's a huge focus on finding meaning and on actively designing careers that reflect our personal narratives. So career construction counseling, the application of the theory, involves this co-creating of a narrative between the counselor and the client. This is a very collaborative approach. The goal is to help the client to explore and reshape their life story through asking a series of thoughtful questions and ultimately creating a more complete and coherent narrative. So this starts with the career construction interview, this key tool in career construction counseling. And this is a set of 5 questions that you might be familiar with. And I think our entire closing session is on the career construction counseling approach. So stick around for more on this. But these 5 questions reveal bigger life stories through eliciting micro-narratives. So micro-narratives, these smaller stories and life experiences that then get synthesized into main life themes, a person's story, or a macro narrative. And the first question, one of the key questions in the career construction interview, is who did you admire growing up? So asking about role models from early childhood. So the identification of role models is actually telling us more about ourselves than about those people. So in talking about the people that we admired growing up, we're talking about the qualities that we admired in them. We're really talking about what we want to see in ourselves. The qualities we admire, something like leadership or creativity or resilience. This describes who we want to be, part of our self-concept or how we'd like to see our self-concept. This is like an ideal version of ourselves. And a better understanding of these qualities, is a better understanding of ourselves. And with that information, we can move forward in a healthier way, more purposeful way. So all these small data points that we gather through the career construction interview ultimately tell a much bigger story, the client's values, their motivations, and their fears, along with other things. So as clients recognize and understand these elements of their life theme, their understanding of themselves, their self-concept continues to evolve, and they can better integrate all of these things into their life and career goals moving forward. So this like integration of all of these parts includes some of these things that maybe we have struggled with in the past. So it's like final important thing in this process is turning past pain into purpose. So in reflecting on past struggles and being able to reinterpret those things can be potentially turned into strengths that influence vocational decisions. So this is the idea of turning a preoccupation into an occupation that challenges obstacles from the past can in fact be the foundation for future meaningful work. So maybe somebody that has struggled with self-doubt as a child could turn around and help others in their professional lives, maybe build self-confidence in some way, again, transforming that personal challenge into a more fulfilling career. So that's the fast overview of career construction theory. The next theory is from John Krumholz, happenstance learning theory. And this encourages individuals to embrace life's uncertainties and recognize that vocational success isn't just about, again, making like one career decision, but it's about engaging with the world and remaining open to new possibilities. So a few key things from happenstance learning theory. First is recognizing the role of chance and unplanned events in our lives. So vocational paths are often shaped by random, unplanned encounters and experiences like a random conversation at the cafe that ultimately leads to a job interview. I'm sure you've all experienced things like this in your own career paths and worked with clients that have experienced these kinds of things. So the theory encourages this openness to opportunities that arise out of these unforeseen events, but it's not just a passive approach. This isn't just like a sit back and wait approach. So this concept of planned happenstance is another big one. And this is the active process here. So there's an active focus on trying to create opportunities through exploration, through experimental actions that lead to outcomes that maybe we couldn't have seen coming. So something like volunteering for a new project or trying a new hobby, but intentionally doing those things, those small actions can ultimately lead to some kind of career growth in the future. And this active approach might come more easily to some people than to others. So there are skills that might need to be developed over time. And this is where a lot of the work of the counselor comes in. So skills like curiosity and persistence and flexibility, optimism, risk-taking, these things might need to be developed in the client and maybe tried on through exploratory behaviors, through new projects, and through networking. And ultimately, these activities help people recognize their own capabilities. So you see some of this like cognitive behavioral approach too in happenstance learning theory. Normalizing all of these things by reflecting on past experiences, by seeing that most of our vocational paths have been these twists and turns and unexpected events in the past, recognizing that some of those have been successes, some of those have been failures, but they've all led us to the point that we are where we are today. And as a client tries to navigate forward through all of this, they're obviously also dealing with external factors, the world around them. So things like the economy have an impact, the societal factors have an impact, structural barriers have an impact, family systems have an impact. So all of these things influence career decisions. And again, a lot of the work of the counselor is with overcoming some of these internal and external blocks. And ultimately, the success of counseling from the happenstance learning approach is what happens in the real world. So this isn't about trying to facilitate some new insight, some new understanding that the client might have, but about having them make progress in the real world. And ultimately, it's about creating a more satisfying life, not just a more satisfying career. So I think back to you, Jess.
James, you did great. You summarized each theory, which takes maybe a week that we normally do, into a few minutes. So thank you for doing that. So more recently, one of the things that we were struggling with as a teaching team is how do we take these theories that are really a reflection of the time that they were developed and make them relevant to our clients today? Because even though some of the constructs may appear outdated, there's other parts of the theories that are relevant and could just be adapted so that they, they can be helpful to conceptualizing our client's case. And so I met with our director of our Master's in Clinical Psychology program, and she has asked me, have you heard of Hall's personal relevance of psychotherapy model, the PROP model? How many of you have heard of this before? Okay, I hadn't either. She said, why don't you take a look, and I think you can utilize this as a way to encourage your students to adapt the theories to make it relevant for their clients. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, what Hall and his colleagues argue is that mental health disparities among racially and ethnically diverse populations can be reduced by increasing the personal relevance of the interventions that are employed. So it's important that any interventions that we use, that we align them with the client's unique needs, which includes their values, their identities, and their lived experiences, right? So that it puts the theories into context, and where possible, we will be able to adapt them. So three key points that I want to cover. So the first one is that the core of patient care, according to this model, or that the personal relevance of psychotherapy is really at the core of patient care within the healthcare sector. So medicine, health, and mental health. And it reflects this precision medicine. So this idea of providing the right treatment to the right person at the right time. Okay. Personal relevance can also be looked as a continuum. So we recognize that cultural adaptations need to be varied by each individual. So even though there are cultural norms that we can apply to help better understand our client's context, within group differences are often greater than between group differences. So some clients may benefit from minimal tailoring or adaptation, while others who perhaps are more deeply embedded in their culture of origin, though there may need to be more modifications based on their background, values, and preferences. And so we have to be able to navigate and shift based on the individual client, even though there may be cultural norms that surround the context of this client. And then finally, this model proposes that by instituting interventions that are more relevant, both personally and culturally, with our clients, that the interventions themselves are more likely to be accepted, they're more likely to be sustained, and they're more likely ultimately to be effective, particularly for racial and ethnic minority populations that have been historically marginalized and have historically underutilized mental health services. So then as we introduce each of the theories to our students, we ask them to consider this question: how would I modify or supplement the theory to make it more inclusive and or personally relevant for my clients' unique needs, their identities, and their lived experiences? So sorry, that was a typo there. We ask them to do that for each one. So even when they're doing case presentations, we always ask them to consider this question. So let me give you an example of how this might be nuanced. So a 28-year-old Iranian woman, she feels conflicted between her passion for pursuing a career in graphic design and her family's encouragement for her to become a physician. So she leans in towards this independence and self-expression that graphic design career would enable her to pursue. Yet she's also seeking ways to balance this personal fulfillment with cultural respect and family respect. So let's look at this client now, but let's shift things to a situation where she may be more deeply embedded in her cultural expectation. So same 28-year-old Iranian woman, she's hesitant to explore alternative careers, feeling a really strong obligation to uphold her family's expectations of becoming a physician. So her identity and her sense of self-worth are closely tied to fulfilling traditional roles and maintaining her family honor. So that would make deviating from the path that they are encouraging probably significantly more emotionally and socially difficult. And so we need to keep that in mind as well too. And we would adapt our approach to make it more personally relevant for these two clients, even though there may be a similar situation. The connection to their cultural norms and how embedded they are in those norms are different. And so our approach needs to be different. So let's do a little bit of practice here, keeping in mind those three theories: the lifespan, career construction, and happenstance learning theory, and this model of personal relevancy. And let's take a look at the case of Keon. So I'm going to put in the chat this case study. And what I'll do right now is share my screen and invite you all to read different portions of it. So Sherilyn, Alexandra, and I see your camera's on. Brianna and Amy, if I get to you and you're not able to, I'll just pause for a minute and then call on someone else. Okay, so let me go back to new share. Okay, all right. So this is the case of Keon, a 17-year-old client. So Anne, can I kindly ask you to read these first two paragraphs?
Sure. Keon is a 17-year-old gay cisgender male from a middle-class Iranian family who has been referred to counseling by his mother. She's concerned about his depressive symptoms and lack of direction regarding his academic and career development, which she attributes to his ADHD. As a junior in high school, Keon feels increasing pressure to determine his post-graduation plans, describing it as a stressful decision. Academically, Keon excels in humanities courses but struggles to maintain focus in other subjects. In his free time, he immerses himself in reading graphic novels and creating art. He draws inspiration from films, particularly science fiction and fantasy, for his artwork. While he dreams of becoming a graphic novel illustrator, he feels he lacks the necessary skills and connections, despite acknowledging, I'm actually a pretty creative person. His graphic novels frequently feature characters who challenge authority and resist conformity.
Thank you, Anne. All right, so introduces Keon here and shares of some contextual factors in his presenting concerns. So Sherilyn, can I invite you to read these next two paragraphs, beginning with last semester?
Last semester, Keon joined his high school's graphic novel and animation club, which now has 8 active members. The club meets weekly to share artwork, discuss storytelling techniques, and collaborate on creative projects. Though initially hesitant to participate, Keon has demonstrated unexpected enthusiasm in helping coordinate club activities and has received positive feedback from the art teacher who serves as the club's faculty advisor. This teacher recently suggested that Keon submit some of his illustrations to a regional youth art competition, an opportunity that could connect him with mentors in the field. However, Keon has been reluctant, believing his work isn't good enough yet. His work experience has been limited and challenging. He recently quit a part-time administrative job, which he obtained through a chance conversation at a family event, after receiving criticism for missing deadlines and showing little initiative. Reflecting on this experience, Keon shared that he felt misunderstood and unappreciated and was bored with the monotony. The only aspect of the job he enjoyed was occasionally writing communication materials for one of his supervisors.
Okay, thank you. So you can see here, there's some areas where he clearly is thriving and those where there's perhaps some misalignment where he's struggling a bit. So Alexandra, can I ask you to read the next two paragraphs that start with when Keon?
When Keon shares his creative aspirations with his family, they respond with pragmatic concerns rather than encouragement. His parents, an older brother, an accountant at a prestigious firm, tell him to be realistic or that his drawings won't pay the bills. These interactions leave Keon feeling like an outsider in his family and failing to meet their expectations. The one exception is his Uncle Mo, whom Keon describes as creative, independent, and unconventional. Unlike other family members, Mo forged his own path and now runs a successful tattoo parlor. Despite his parents' professional success, his mother runs a thriving real estate business and his father is an accomplished architect. Keon remembers them frequently discussing financial stress and working long hours throughout his childhood. Self-described as non-confrontational, Keon typically retreats to his room during times of household tension, where he finds solace in his creative interests.
Thank you, Alexandra. All right, so oh, Amy, I see your camera on. Do you mind reading the final paragraph when discussing?
Sure, and sorry, I'm sort of eating lunch, so that's why I have my camera off, but no worries.
No worries.
So when discussing his counseling goals, Keon expressed wanting to, quote, feel excited about school and my future, end quote, to be, quote, more focused, not so distracted all the time, end quote, and to pursue something that makes my parents proud, so they'll get off my back. He also shared his concern that he is falling behind compared to my classmates.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. So you can see here, there's a lot of dynamics into play, and you can see how some of his identities might be impacting his career development process as well, too. So let's just play with this a little bit, and we're gonna ask some questions for group discussion. We won't get into breakouts given the size and time. But so James, I'll start with the lifespan and then pass it over to you. Okay, so considering Keon's case, if we had to look at Keon's case from a lifespan developmental perspective, Okay. How would you assess his self-concept? What do you think? What might be impacting his self-concept? Let's look at it that way. His view of himself.
Were you asking one person or the group?
The group, yes.
Okay.
You're the group now, Alexandra.
Okay.
Take it away. Yes.
Okay. Well, certainly the disconnect between his interests and his evident strengths, but between those and what his family experience and expectations are, or at least what he perceives them to be, seems to be affecting his self-concept.
Yes. Yes. Great. So he has these interests and skills, yet they contrast. There's a contrast between the expectations that others in his life, immediate circle have on him, and that might be impacting how he views himself. So what stage do you think Keon is in? And I'm opening this up to the group. What, according to Super's life stages, what stage do you think he is in?
I forgot the name of it, but he's not on the other end of the rainbow. He's on the, I don't know what that phase is called, like adolescent figuring out himself phase.
Is it
Yeah,
exploration?
let's pull that up here. Yes. Let's take a look here.
Just put them in the chat there, but yeah, that's a great visual.
Oh, great. Yes. Exploration. So why do we think he's in the exploration stage?
He's just not sure. I mean, on the one hand, he's contemplating graphic design. On the other hand, he's getting mixed messages from family and friends about being late and trying new jobs out, or, feeling misunderstood. And there's just a lot that he's kind of still exploring and thinking about, plus the family kind of pressures and the family of wanting what they're wanting for him. So he's kind of all over the place. Plus, there's some depression going on, so that's impacting where he's at career-wise and kind of hindering where he is in his career, because that needs to be addressed first. There's a lot.
Yes, exactly. And so he's still kind of figuring out what his options are, and that has become the challenge is that what he enjoys exploring is affirmed by some people in his life, but not by others, right? And then when he says, I feel behind, there's this tension between perhaps wanting to be already decided or already on a path and not. And sometimes our clients feel that. We hear our students or clients say that, I feel like I should have already picked something by now, or I feel like I've already should have that I'm really far behind compared to everyone else. And that tension between where I am and where I think I should be of life stages can create a lot of angst, right? So having this model might help us reflect where some of their angst is coming from. It could be just this dissonance between where I am and where I think that I should be, right? Okay, I could go on, but then I don't want to hog the other theories. So James, I'll turn it back to you.
Sure, thanks. So let's just start with the third question here under career construction theory. So in what ways does Uncle Mo serve as a role model for Keon's career construction, and how might this relationship be leveraged in counseling, right? So we talked about the influence of role models and how those qualities we admire about them are really sort of about ourselves and how we want to show up in the world. So how do you see that at play with the relationship with Uncle Mo?
I would suggest that, as with exploration at different stages and of career development, that reaching out to somebody who has an interest that's somewhat similar to the client's own interest, I think if he weren't a relative, Uncle Mo might be seen as an informational interview contact. But since he's a relative, I probably wouldn't put it in those terms. But as someone who can share from his own experience and hear some of Keon's interests, that Keon might be able to access his uncle as a person to provide both a listening ear and some validation, as well as some suggestions for how to perhaps investigate, how Keon could investigate his interests further, um, in order to keep kind of the door open for himself.
Yeah, definitely a role model in maybe a number of ways. And I'm also hearing some of like happenstance, to skip ahead to happenstance, but right, like trying this on in some way through this super safe action of having a conversation with an uncle. And then maybe that leads to other informational interviews or exploring other paths forward through other actions and things too. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I would just,
Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to remind the speakers that it's about 1:45 now. And so we've got about, because I think Rick is going to close the rooms up. So just be aware of time. And I posted the evaluation form. Please fill it out. I think this has been such a wonderful presentation. And so it does really help if you fill out the evaluation form for our speakers. Go ahead, Amy. Were you going to say something?
yeah, it's fine. I also think that Uncle Mo is relatable because he's on the outside of the family as well. He is not culturally matched with his family, so it's so important as an auntie myself. Oftentimes our nieces and nephews really reach out to other members of the family to feel accepted, and I think that they can identify with each other.
Yeah, great insight.
And we,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead, Sherilyn. No, please.
I was just also going to say, like, the fact that he is an uncle, and it talks about him being creative and going on his own path, and just, it's not traditional for a Persian gentleman to like go into the artistic fields and stuff. And so he already has someone who hopefully he's close to or can kind of build that relationship with, his uncle who has done something different by being in a tattoo parlor, and doing that. So I feel like, in addition to hopefully it being a safe space, if they have that type of relationship where it can get there, like he has someone else who's Iranian, who's a male, who's done something different than the norm in his family.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight, right? So part of what draws Keon to Uncle Mo is that he wants to be able to be like this too, right? It is again kind of aspirational, and he has his own challenges to face. But this is in a way like how Keon would like to show up in the world too. We talked a little bit about happenstance a second ago, but maybe any other looking again at question 3 under happenstance, but small experimental actions that Keon could take to continue to explore all of this, and in particular his illustration interests, while building confidence and the necessary skills.
I'd have to give some thought from the practitioner's perspective about how to encourage Keon towards this without directing too much, but this opportunity to submit his work that one of his instructors offered that he was hesitant about. But if he could move past the hesitation and submit his work, it seems like a relatively small step.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start, right? And we've seen that that Keon's already taken some seen happenstance show up in his life in other ways through the previous job opportunity that was through a family connection. And some of this is just like normalizing that this is how things are done, and it's okay that he doesn't have to have it all figured out all at once. He can start with this, and yet a lot of the work with the counselor might be building some of those skills and confidence and overcoming some of those mental blocks to action.
His parents wouldn't like this idea, but he could work for Uncle Mo and he could do some murals on his tattoo shop walls. But I'm sure their heads would explode if that happened. But, Uncle Mo could give him some job skills and give him an opportunity to showcase his artwork.
Yeah, that's a great, right? And maybe that's maybe a starting point is just to have that conversation with Uncle Mo, with the parents. What would it be? What would it be okay if something like this happened? How would that fit into our family system? And maybe there's an openness there to be discovered or created.
I wonder too, if there might be room for Keon to consider initiating a conversation with his parents in which he reflects back the concerns he's hearing from them, or whoever is it an older brother who said that, you know, he wouldn't be able to make a living. I can't remember the exact language, but that to let his family member, his close family members know that he hears their concerns and that those are important to him. And he's wanting to use or keep those concerns in mind as he also explores what's interesting to him, and that he's, if it's true, that he's committed to finding a way to support himself in life. But in any case, it would have to be, of course, some way in which he would feel comfortable having if he felt comfortable having a conversation with his parents, doing it in a way where he didn't feel like he was contradicting them too much, but really trying to let them know he hears them and validates their concerns while he also does his exploration.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. And again, maybe even like just practicing that conversation with the counselor beforehand, certainly going back to the prop model that we discussed, thinking about how this shows up for Keon and how maybe what the starting point is, what the counselor's expectation about that family conversation looks like versus Keon's expectation, and making sure that we're moving forward on Keon's terms in a way that's helpful for him. Yeah, great insight. And Yas, you want to wrap us up?
Sure. So we can see here that with the case of Keon, if we look at it from a lifespan perspective, we can see how there's tension between where he is and where he wants to be, right? And not really encouraged to explore in the way that perhaps his interests are reflecting. We also see that his role as a child is very salient right now because he's living at home. The role of a student is very salient right now. So that's something that will shift as he grows older too, perhaps. If we look at it from a career construction theory perspective, what he's writing about in the graphic novels reflects some of the same characteristics that he admires in Mo, that he probably, as someone who maybe is non-confrontational, wants to develop or aspire to. So we can see some of those themes that come in through his storytelling and his role models. And then from a happenstance perspective, we can look to see how chance events have led him to where we are, and how could he identify some other exploratory action steps like the art competition to give him more information and perhaps help him to see more opportunities. But all this keeping in mind the identities of who he is as a gay man, as his ADD, some of the depressive symptoms. So also in keeping in mind those other identity factors that might be impacting his process, and also would inform how we would work with Keon and helping him move forward. So, well, thank you for your time. We have our references listed here, and would love to connect with those of you who we're not connected to, but just appreciate you taking the time. And it's fun to think about how we can pull from different constructs to deepen our work and also to impact our clients in a more positive and inclusive way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, James. And yes, this was a wonderful presentation. We can stay here as long as we want until we get kicked out. So I think we still at least have maybe 4 or 5 minutes. So please feel free to ask questions. And I'm going to post the link again. It really does help CCDA as well as the speakers if you fill out the evaluation form. So please click on the link right away, and then you can fill it out. So questions for Yas and James?
Yeah, or comments?
I don't have questions. This was great. I really appreciated being able to connect theory to application and like having a case study. So thank you. And it was like the time went by really quick. So great presentation.
Thank you, Cheryl.
I will also say I have an 18-year-old son, and I could see a lot of him in the case study. So it's practically useful for me as a parent.
Oh, yes. It's very personally relevant for you, Alexandra. Yes. Yes. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much.
You're watching it firsthand.
What theories did you, oh, bye, Sherilyn.
Bye.
What theories did you leave out that you wished you could have put in today?
James, is there any that you wish you would have
Oh,
pulled apart?
I think these three like play really well together, and so they feel like fitting choices for a single case study. But maybe social cognitive career theory would have been like an obvious addition. I mean, yeah, obviously we both really like theories, so we'd say they're all really, really wonderful in so many different ways. But that's probably the one that comes to mind beyond these three.
That's
Okay.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, you know,
And
I jumped in late, but I look forward to watching the whole recording because I do want to learn about the other theories that you put up. But this was really well done in the short time I was here. I appreciate it.
thank you. Thanks,
Thanks,
Amy.
Amy.
Good to see you again. I loved your
I
presentation
know.
earlier as well.
That's great. Okay, bye-bye.
All
Bye,
right, bye.
Amy.
All right,
Great.
I
Thank
can
you
go ahead
so
and stop
much.
the recording.
Yes.